Hey friends, this is Aaron Summers, and welcome to the Church Brain Podcast. Each week, we help churches think clearly during seasons of stress and transition. And today, we're talking about how churches accidentally choose the wrong pastor. Now, that's not because they don't care, and it's not because they're clueless. It happens because we move forward without enough clarity. So today, I want to give you 4 questions to talk to your pastors, candidates about. This is search committees that need to look at this thoroughly and help them to slow down and choose wisely. Churches do not usually choose the wrong pastor because of bad intent. They choose the wrong pastor because clarity was never fully established before the decision was made. Let me ask you a question before we even get into this process. Are you trying to make a good decision, or are you trying to relieve the discomfort of being in the process itself? Those are not the same thing. And a lot of churches simply move too fast because staying in the process feels heavy. So here are 4 questions that you need to ask. Number 1, what do we actually need right now? Not ideally, not the GOAT. That was last week's podcast. And we don't need 5 years from now. That's not what I'm talking about. Right now, what do you need? Does your church need stability? Do you need to rebuild trust? Do you need clear leadership? Do you need better systems? Do you need stronger discipleship? Because each one of those is a different kind of skill set. And you need to know what you need right now. This is why I encourage the pastor profile and the church profile so deeply. Because you got to know who you are and you got to know what you need. Because if you can't answer those questions clearly, how do you evaluate a candidate clearly? Every candidate's going to look good in some areas, but if you don't know what you actually need, you can drift toward whatever feels right instead of who fits your moment and how God has set you up today for the needs of tomorrow. Question number 2. What does success look like in year 1? Have you thought about that? We talk about what's your vision for the future. We ask candidates, hey, we have this problem. How are you going to fix this problem? But do we actually articulate what does success look like in year 1? See, most of us just expect a 5-year vision plan or 5 years of progress in 1 year, and that's just not reality. So we need to define what it is that we need. What would faithfulness actually look like in year 1? And this ties back into the first question. So is it stability? Is that what faithfulness looks like in year 1, that our church becomes stable? Is it that we trust one another? Is it that we have unity? Is it that our staff is aligned once again? Is it small, steady growth? What does faithfulness look like in year 1? You see, if you don't define this level of success, disappointment is almost guaranteed. Not because the pastor fails, but because the expectations were never made clear and you didn't know it to even tell him. Well, that leads us directly into question 3, and this one's going to take a little bit of time. What does fit actually mean? See, this is where I'm going to spend a lot of time with committees, because every church says we want the right fit. We need the right kind of guy. But what does that mean? How is that defined? And I think there's 5 areas, and I used to say 4, but I say 5 now. I think there's 5 areas we need to look at. Theology. Obviously, we have to have a theological fit. And this is not just about agreeing on a statement of faith. Which Baptist Faith and Message do we agree to? Most candidates can sign your document. Here's the real question. Do we align on how theology actually shows up in preaching, leadership, and decision-making? Because the church and the pastor can agree on paper, but still lead very differently. You're not just calling what someone believes. You're calling how those beliefs get lived out every week. So you need to ask those kinds of questions. What do you believe on women in ministry? What do you believe about salvation? What do you believe about the invitation at the end of messages? What do you believe about the theology of baptism and Lord's Supper? What do you believe about Christology? What do you believe about ecclesiology, which we'll get into in a second? What do you believe about these things? And if you don't know what those words mean, you need to find out, go to Google, find out what it means, figure out what it means, and look at it for yourself. Another area is church culture. See, it's one thing to understand the belief system, but how does that play out? Because your church can believe certain things and they need to understand what that means. But then there's the traditions and the culture and the non negotiables that we often overlook. Does this leader understand how your church actually operates? Not how you say it operates. How are decisions really made? How is conflict actually handled? How is communication flowing or not flowing in your church? How does change actually happen? Is it even welcomed or is it not welcome? How does what we say we believe play out in everyday life? How far does that go? Where does it stop? Where are the boundaries? Where's the guardrails? Because we need to understand that. Some churches have a translation requirement. Some churches say women can serve in these roles, but not these roles. And that's different with every church. What's your church? Some are we sing off the wall or we sing out of the hymnals. What is your church? What's the tradition? Where are the areas that are non negotiable for you? What are the areas that are negotiable with you? And then there's the gray in between. That's the church culture. How do things actually operate? Because a pastor needs to fit that. If he misreads the culture, friction can start early. If you don't clearly communicate that, it can cause problems early on. And it's just because we weren't clear. Well, the third area is the larger community surrounding the church. Can the pastor connect where you are? Can his wife and his family fit in? Are they going to fit in the culture? Are they going to thrive in the culture? Or is it going to be a burden and a stress from the very beginning? And it's not just lead in general, but lead here. Can they lead in this community? Because the Great Commission says that we need to be reaching the whole community, not just what's inside the walls, not what's just comfortable. Can we thrive? Can he thrive in this community? Can he relate to your people? Does the pastor understand the community? Can they engage the people that you're trying to reach? Because a good pastor in the wrong context is going to struggle. Well, another one is a financial fit. And I know this is uncomfortable for some search committees because I tell them they need to figure this part out up front. Now, I came through a time when you didn't talk about the finances until the very end. I'm suggesting to committees, you need to figure that out on the front end. You need to post up front in your job postings. Here's the base pay, and we can negotiate that, but here's the base pay and the benefits. You need to tell that up front, not because pastors are money hungry, but we need clarity in this way. What's the point of getting emotionally involved with an individual that isn't going to fit financially? Every family needs different things. Can you provide a livable wage for this pastor and their family? Not a livable wage from the 60s, but a livable wage in the 2020s. Can you provide a livable wage in today's economy? And it's not just what you pay, but it's the expectations and the pace that come with that. I interviewed with the church years ago that that was in kind of a resort kind of area, and what they were paying and where they expected the pastor to live did not match up. What they were paying was going to require living in a different community because I couldn't afford to live in that community. And they didn't understand that. They didn't comprehend that. And so that was a mismatch. And I bowed out of that interview process because it just wasn't going to work. See, that's the expectations. if the expectations are that you live a certain quality of life and you want your pastor to live a certain quality, are you providing the wages necessary for that? And on the other side, the pastor and spouse have to be able to live well within your context. If it doesn't fit, it's going to surface later. And if it surfaces later, it's going to lead to an early exit. Now, here's one I think that this is new and we don't really talk about this. We haven't really talked about this, but this is going to be a growing situation. A recent article in the Wall Street Journal by Susie Welch from NYU did a research study on the values of our older population versus the values of our younger population. And they're radically different. Surprise, right? I mean, we know that it's going to be different. And I'm not going to say that one is right and one is wrong. I'm saying we are different. And if we don't discuss the values, we're going to run into problems. We've got to be clear on this. Why? Because it increasingly shapes whether a pastor and church can thrive together. Do the church and pastor define ministry the same way? Think about it this way. What does faithfulness look like to you? What does it look like to them? What does healthy leadership look like? You see, I know many churches that view healthy leadership as 60 hours in the office and then another 20 in visitation out with their people. That's not sustainable, nor is that welcomed by our younger generation. Well, that's just what they signed up for. That's just the way it is. Well, then good luck finding a pastor. You're not going to find a pastor that wants to put in 80 hours a week. And so we have to understand, what does healthy leadership look like? What does faithfulness look like? Is it accessible 24 hours a day? Or are there guardrails in that? Are you okay with the pastor not answering his phone at 2 a.m. in the morning? How accessible is he expected to be? How does the church view boundaries, family time, pace, leadership style? How many days is he in the office? Can he office out of a coffee shop? Can he office remotely from home? What are the allowances? And not just what you personally will allow. What's the church going to allow? What does the church value in that regard? And do we need to make some adjustments to meet in the middle? Because right now, according to research, what it says is that what the older population values only matches with 2% of the younger generation. 2%. Let that sink in. We need to think through these things. You see, many churches today were shaped by an older ministry style and value, and that's okay. It's centered on visibility, availability, stability, and endurance. But many younger pastors are entering ministry with stronger emphases on sustainability, collaboration, emotional health, and family presence. Now think about that. Those are different. And I'm not going to say that one side is automatically wrong. It's not. But what I'm saying is there's tension here if we don't talk about it. And if those assumptions are never discussed, disappointment will show up later. See, good theology alone doesn't guarantee good alignment. A church and a pastor can agree doctrinally and still struggle because they're operating from two different ministry value systems. A stronger fit leads to a longer future. And let me say this, pastor-church fit is much closer to a marriage than a hiring situation. One is not supposed to dominate the other. The pastor's not supposed to come in and just dominate the church. They're not supposed to come in and their agenda becomes the church's agenda. On the other side, a church should not dominate the pastor and tell him, well, this is how it is, and you have to do it this way. You have to fit into our particular mold, and we are unwilling to stretch. We are unwilling to give in any regard. That's not healthy either. But there is supposed to be a complement with each other. There's a helping with each other, that they fit together. So the church has to know her identity. The pastor needs to understand his identity, and we need to find a good fit in this way: the theological fit, church culture, community, financial, and values. Do we fit together? And the church has to know who it is. Healthy churches know who they are. See, this is what allows them to find a pastor that can complement them and stretch them without shaming or ignoring who they are. But if you don't define it clearly, you'll end up making bad decisions based on feelings instead of alignment and fit. Okay, here's the fourth question that a church needs to ask, a search committee needs to ask. Where are we assuming agreement? See, this one gets missed all the time. Sometimes you say, oh, well, we all agree, but no one defines what that really means. So say it out loud. Define it in your committee meetings. Ask about it in your written questions or your interviews. What does strong leadership actually mean? What does a good communicator actually look like here? Most committees don't lack discussion. They lack shared definitions. And that's where misalignment begins. So, where are you assuming alignment that has never actually been defined? Slowing down for clarity really doesn't delay the process, but it does protect the outcome. Healthy decisions are rarely rushed, and rushed decisions are rarely healthy. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. If this episode was helpful, share it with another search committee or with your whole committee or a leader walking through this process. And make sure to subscribe to the Church Brain so you receive the weekly briefings and podcasts like these. Remember, clarity prevents confusion later.